love when that happens, buddy. Andrew,
Of
how are
course.
you, sir?
Oh, I'm pretty good. I'm running on fumes, but my shirt's ready for spring training. I'm ready to talk about fights. Here and definitely, I mean, how about like this card as the appetizer to the Super Bowl? You have number one and number two pound for pound guys in the world fighting, and we'll get into what I actually think about it later, but on the surface of it, it's pretty exciting.
Dude, I this is one of those games that or this is one of those fight cards that you've been waiting for so long and
Yeah.
it's finally happening.
Well, and it's like it could be a little bit better card. Like if Whitaker was on the card, if Kai France was on the card, if they had a couple of, I think they both were originally scheduled to be on the card and their fights dropped off for different reasons. But um, it is still a pretty fun card, top to bottom.
Super excited. All right, before we get into this card, I didn't get a chance to look at your picks today, but I know we're about to go and I know during the show here we're going to be live on a game. I need a hockey lock right now.
Hockey, Islanders in regulation, or Islanders no OT, or Islanders through my money line.
All right, that's your pick.
They're
I
all the
like it.
same thing. I mean, Islanders to win without overtime.
Let's roll.
That's the one I tweeted today too.
What's the what was that odds on that?
I had minus 130.
Okay. I like that. You heard it here, folks. Islanders are getting it
This is
done.
Thursday, February 9th, 2023 that we're recording this. So if
They
you're
are getting
watching
it
it on
done.
Saturday, this is not an Islanders pick for Saturday. This is for Thursday.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to episode 30 30
31.
31.
I think. Does it
Episode
really matter?
31
But I think it's
of
31.
Recliner or Knockout Bets podcast brought to you by Recliner Sports Report. Thank you all for tuning in. This week we are talking about UFC 284, Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski. A one that as we were saying earlier, just one that we are excited and super pumped that is finally here. So we have our top four fights of the night that we think provide some value to the card and are definitely can provide a couple good angles to place some bets on. So let's get right into it. The first fight that we are going to break down tonight, we are looking at Jimmy Crute. Jimmy Crute is coming in at 12-3. He's going to be fighting Alonzo Menifield, who is coming in at the slight underdog, and he is looking at 13-3. This is a light heavyweight bout. Andrew, talk to us. How's this one going to play out?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting fight in a lot of ways, I think. But the one that I would definitely tread carefully with betting. Jimmy Crute, we've seen him I think we were actually together in the same place when he got his knee shredded by Anthony Smith. And as unfortunate of an injury as that was for Jimmy Crute, that hit a huge bet for both of us.
Yes,
So we were
in your living
excited at
room.
the time, even though that was a terrible, terrible, terrible injury for Jimmy Crute. So coming back, he's had a fight since then, I think. He's a really good wrestler. He did have
Yeah,
a fight. He got knocked
Jamal
out
Hill.
by Jamal Hill,
Yeah,
who's now
which
the champion of the division. Um, he's a really, really good wrestler. He has KO power. He's decently technical on the feet. He's still only 26 years old, so he's had like some ups and some downs in the UFC already, and is still young. And so, if that knee is rehabilitated and healthy, you're still looking at a young sort of up and coming guy. He was a top prospect at one point. I mean, you can see he's fought some of the top guys recently, and has kind of earned his way towards the top of the division more than Alonzo Menifield has this point in his career. Um, I think that skill for skill, Crute is absolutely the better fighter, but he's also hittable on the feet. He can get touched on the chin, and while Alonso is not technical at all, he hits really, really, really hard. Um, he has big kind of looping hooks, but if one of those connects, it's liable to put you to sleep. He wins a lot of fights in the first round, and can have gas tank issues, has shown gas tank issues as fights go later. He also has really, really good takedown defense, which I think is a key factor in this point. I think Crute's going to come out and look to wrestle, to tire Menifield out, to take away that one hit KO power. So I hesitate to even call it a bet. I have like 1/10 of a unit on Alonzo Menifield to win in the first round at plus 525, I think it is. That's the only angle that I've found that I like in this fight. I just have a problem really trusting either guy. Crute, just because I don't really know what we're going to see, having had some time off, having had a couple quick and painful losses in his last couple of fights. And then Menifield, I'm just not buying that he's all that skilled and that he has all that much for anybody after the first round. So yeah, I've got that Menifield wins in the first round plus 525. I think there's a little value there if similar line is still out there, but I put a tiny bet on that. Definitely going to be looking live. I think if it's a close competitive first round and you can get a decent live line on Crute going into the second, that would also be something I would look at. If Crute dominates the first round of his wrestling, don't live bet him at minus 600 going into the second round. There's no value there. But if you can get him at minus 150 going into the second round or any kind of plus money, that would be something I would look at.
Yeah, I think this is all going to come down to what happens in the first round. Can Crute effectively get Menifield down, or is Menifield going to show what he's shown his last two fights, which is, or even, and you go three before that first round finish. His one loss in his last, five fights came from a unanimous decision. I think Crute's definitely got to stick to a good game plan that's going to be lots of volume, lots of pressure, keep it tight. Don't let Menifield just poke at him from range and hit him with that one shot. He's really got to get in there and put pressure on him, really wear and lean on him. Being a Crute fan, and I like his heart, I like the style. Even when he got that injury against Anthony Smith, he still wanted to go out, even though his knee was literally his leg looked like it was falling off at the knee. He was still like telling the doctor, no, he wants to fight, getting the crowd pumped up. It was definitely, he is a warrior. So I think the prop to look out here is Menifield by knockout or Crute by decision. I think those are the two props that are live there. But I'm going to be
I can
putting.
see Crute finishing it too.
He's got the power. He definitely has the power to do it, and he's definitely
And
got
the wrestling.
the wrestling to do it. But I think if he wins this, I think Menifield's a tough dude to put away. So I do see that possibility of going to decision. But I am liking Crute in this one. And I know he's not a huge, well, he is a little bit big of a favorite, minus 190. That's pretty wide for normal. But I like him, and I'm definitely, I may even like put him in with like Islam on a parlay, just to kind of round out a parlay like that.
Yeah. I love the confidence. I'm way more nervous to be on
Oh,
either
I'm
side
not
of
I'm
this
not
fight. This
confident by
is
any means. I just like Crute. I think if I'm going to pick a side here, I think I'm going to be rooting for Crute. So, definitely not confident. This one's definitely, me, betting with more of the gut. But I do see this is definitely close. I think if you're looking for value on the money line, then Menifield's definitely the one to go with because
yeah.
he has the
And
potential
that's
to put
even
this one
closed
away.
in from what it was earlier in the week. And like I said, I think Crute's got the skills, but Menifield's got the takedown defense and power to
Uh,
possibly end it early.
all right, moving right along. We are going to the third. What what do they call this one? Not the co-main, the featured
Featured
bout. The
bout.
featured bout. Featured bout. We have a welterweight fight versus Jack Della, which is he is coming in at 13-2. and he's going against Randy Brown, coming in at 16-4. Randy Brown is the pretty wide underdog here at plus 260, and I'm seeing a line right now for Jack coming in at minus 330. How do you see this fight breaking down?
Yeah, I think that line is pretty accurate. Jack Della around minus 300 seems about right. Um, this is a little bit of step up in competition for Jack Della Maddalena. So there is that slight sort of caveat and hesitancy. I think if it wasn't a step up in competition for him, um, he might even be a bigger favorite if he had already beat a guy the level of Randy Brown, but he hasn't quite done that in the UFC quite yet. But I think he's the truth. I think Jack Della Maddalena is going to be in the top 10. If he can get a couple more fights this year, I think it'll be this year. If not definitely by early 2024. And I think he's going to be in the top 10 for a while. He is an incredible striker, heavy power. His jab is amazing. He has really good volume and output. He works the body really well. His technical boxing is just like next level for a UFC fighter. Um, his wrestling and ground game leaves a little bit to be desired. It's definitely something he's going to have to work on, especially as he moves up. If he were to fight somebody, like an Islam, and somebody that's just going to try to take you down over and over and over again, that might be more of a problem. But Randy Brown's not really that guy. Randy Brown's a pretty solid striker in his own right. He has big length for the division, and he uses it well. He's good at staying on the outside, popping the jab. He also has decent grappling. So a line that I've seen that just seems crazy is Randy Brown by sub can be had, I think, like plus 1200. I haven't bet it myself because I don't think it's going to happen, but I think there's a tiny little, if you like to take those super long shots, I think there's a tiny little bit of value on Randy Brown by sub. He has a handful of sub wins in his professional career. And that's Jack Della's maybe one little weakness. But I see this probably Jack Della getting a finish on the feet, um, working the body, working up to the head, getting the TKO most likely. But I feel I wouldn't say it's like the most confident ever that he's a good parlay piece, but I definitely think he's a strong one for this card.
Yeah, I think, Jack, like you said, he's one of those guys that he's going to be in the top 10. There's no doubt. He's just got too much talent. Randy Brown is the guy that you have to beat that level of competition to go through and get up there. Um, but yeah, I see this one being pretty one-sided, and I know this is the UFC and anything can happen, but I think Jack just has too many different weapons, right? And you even like look at their fighting styles. You got, mixed martial arts versus Randy Brown is just known as a striker. I just think that um, he's got a lot more tools in his toolkit. I think he wins this fight very easily. Um, I would I think the prop to look for this one is either the under or by finish, specifically by knockout. I think Jack can get that one in and get the W.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I mentioned, I think he's a decent parlay piece. All I've done for this fight so far is I parlayed Jack Della with Yair Rodriguez, which is the next fight we're going to talk about.
I love fitting Jack in here in parlays. I love that. I have also done that too. Again, I think that's one of the ones where I'll get to it later. I think you kind of know where I'm going to be going with this one about where I'm I'm hoping to have a couple parlays with Islam to finish, but really, I think at the end of the day, I think the big one is going to be to have money on the our friend from down under. Um,
Well, we'll talk about that one when we get
yeah,
there
right.
because I definitely am on the other side pretty heavy.
Oh yeah, I think, and I don't think you're wrong either. Um, All
It
right.
is a crazy line though. Like the guy is the well, let's wait till we get there to talk about it.
All right. Next up, we have um, Yair Rodriguez versus Josh Emmett. Rodriguez is coming in at 15-3, and Emmett is coming in at 18-2. Emmett is the underdog at plus 160, and Rodriguez is coming in at minus 190. Andrew, talk to me. How do you think this one's going to break out?
Yeah, so this is a really, really interesting fight. And so this is I think the most recent bet I put in was the parlay of Jack Della and Yair, and I could have gotten a better number if I had done it earlier in the week, and I put in other bets earlier in the week, and I was really hesitant about this one. I really had to dig into this one, go back and watch some tape, look at as much information was as is available to me in the time that I have to figure out how I felt about this one. And I still don't love betting against Josh Emmett. I've kind of feel like I've gotten lucky almost. He's made me some money in his last couple of fights. The dude is tough. He comes to bang. He has wrestling in his back pocket that he doesn't use all that often, but he does have pretty good wrestling. Um, that being said,
That Calvin Cater fight with him was just such a brawl. It was such a great
right.
fight, and just like you said, it makes it so hard to bet against him.
Right. And there's an argument that he lost that fight against Calvin Cater and shouldn't even be here, but he keeps his fights close and he keeps getting the decisions. Um, and the dude can bang. Like he's definitely going to have a major power advantage on the feet in this one. Um, if there's a knockout, I think it's more likely to come from Emmett than it is from Yair, although, I could see some crazy head kick from Yair knockout. Um, what made me hesitate a little bit on Yair, he's only had 4 fights in the past 5 years. That's a pretty crazy stat. And if you look at those 4 fights, one of those, his most recent fight, was Brian Ortega getting a freak injury in the first like few seconds of the fight. So it wasn't even really a fight, even though it's on his official record.
Which we
So
were there
really,
for,
right,
and was miserable to watch. What a
right.
great whole card all the way
Build up
until that.
until freak injury in the first
Bruce
few seconds
Buffer,
of the main
Bruce
event.
Buffer got us all jacked up just to
It was
watch a
over
freak
that
injury.
quick. Right. So really, in a way, he's had 3 fights in the last 5 years. It is one way to look at it. And that's a pretty crazy low number, and there are various reasons for that. Um, what got me to betting on Yair and feeling good about it is actually the only loss that he's had in the last 5 years was his fight against Max Holloway. Um, Anybody who listens to our show, pays attention to my tweets, knows I love Max Holloway. I know he lost at least 2 of those fights to Volk, and the last one pretty convincingly. But I'm a huge Max Holloway fan. I think he's one of the greatest of all time. Um, and the fight that Yair Rodriguez put up against Max Holloway was really, really strong. He won 2 rounds. Uh, Max Holloway won that fight 48-47 on the way that I scored it, and 2 out of the 3 judges had it scored that same way too. So he took 2 rounds off of Max Holloway. That's pretty impressive. That's one way to look at it is he took 2 rounds and had a close fight against Max Holloway. Josh Emmett arguably lost, had a really close fight with Calvin Kattar. And it doesn't work this way. It's not a perfect science, but look what Max Holloway did to Calvin Kattar.
Exactly.
He put one of the most hellacious beatings in recent memory of fights on him. So that just speaks to level of competition more than anything. Also, Josh Emmett is 37 years old. He's had some surgeries in his history. Yair is 30. He's in his prime. He has the creative striking. He has. I'm convinced that he has the get up ability, even if Emmett does take him down. I like Yair in this fight with like 6 or 7 out of 10 confidence.
Yeah, I think this is one of those ones where it's super tough to take a pick because again, Yair, it's so hard to judge off his last fight because honestly, like it looked like Brian Ortega was really gonna start introducing some good wrestling in there, and then you have a freak accident that causes his, shoulder to dislocate. And then on the other end, you got Josh Emmett, who has kind of just been just like getting these dirty, grimy wins. Um,
Totally.
Much well deserving. He's put in, again, I think with anything, when you take it to the judge's scorecard, you're leaving it up to interpretation but he knows how to do the right things. I do see this thing as Yair, really winning in the striking department, but I also see this thing as Emmett just really executing a good game plan on putting some pressure on Yair. But again, you look back and
He can
Yair's
use his offensive wrestling. He
yeah,
has a
but
chance.
Yair's also no slouch on the ground. Because again, even when Ortega was kind of putting him in, he did get out of it and ended up putting it in a position where Ortega got his shoulder dislocated. So I think this is a tough one. I think some ways to look at the way I'm looking at this is I'm gonna incorporate Yair into a couple just parlays, but I'm gonna probably cover up on the other end with sprinkle a little bit on the money line for Emmett there. I'm really torn on this one just to have some money on the fight, but I'm hoping everything else gets plays out to where I can be able to cover up with where I'm not losing money on this, but that's where I'm at with this fight. I think if there's any
Right.
value, if you're looking at value pick, the value pick's definitely on Emmett with the plus money. I think the other lines to look at is the over and fight to end by a decision. Again, I don't know which fighter you pick, but I see this thing going the distance, all 5 rounds.
I like it.
All right. That brings us to the main event of the evening, the fight that everyone's been waiting for, the fight that I think I think I'm
The fight
hoping
that Dana White is promoting slap boxing or whatever that
what
slap
I
fight instead of.
what I hope doesn't happen is that this is a big letdown. I hope that this is a fight, but I also could see this thing ending early. But let's get into it. We have Islam Makhachev, who's coming in at 23-1 against Alexander the Great Volkanovski, who is coming in at 25-1. Both are champions in their own division. This is going to be a lightweight fight, a title fight too. Andrew, talk to me. How do you see this one going down?
Yeah. So have you seen pictures of their size difference? Like
Oh,
their height and it's insane. Like
he's
Islam's
almost a
almost a
half.
whole like head taller than
Well, he
this.
is a half a foot, almost a half a foot taller, just naturally. So,
Right.
but weirdly
Right.
enough, Volkanovski's got the longer reach.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got some long arms for a short guy.
He does, which has
Um,
helped him a lot in his fighting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Volkanovski is deservedly so the number one best pound for pound fighter out there right now. I mean, I just was talking a second ago about how highly I think of Max Holloway, and he beat him. I mean, he has 3 wins over Max Holloway. I think he really beat him twice, but he definitely beat him convincingly the third time. Put that to rest of who's the better fighter between the two of those guys. And he's just an absolute savage. He's a really incredible striker. He mixes in takedowns at unpredictable times. He's not really so much of a power knockout guy, but can get it done that way. Uh, his volume on the feet is really, really good. I mean, to say these guys, for either one of them, it's like to say they're really, really good at this. Of course they are. They're the two best pound for pound fighters in the world right now. Like it almost feels silly to say. Like these are the two best guys out there right now. Um, and like to say they're well rounded, of course they are. They're the best fighters in the world. To say they're good at everything, of course they are. I mean, everybody talks about Islam's wrestling and his grappling, but he's a really, really good striker too, and he doesn't get enough credit for that. And similarly with Volk with his wrestling, people talk more about his striking, but he's a pretty good wrestler. Uh, what this comes down to for me is two things. Number one, the size difference. As talented as Volk is, that's a huge obstacle to overcome. Coming up from 145 to 155, the size of Islam, and then watching Volkanovski's fight against Brian Ortega. And the things that Brian Ortega was able to do to Volk, he had his head turning purple, and Volk somehow squeezed out of that submission. But if Islam Makhachev puts him in the same position, I don't see him being able to get out. And the Brian Ortega was able to take down Volk twice. Brian Ortega's takedown accuracy is 23%, which is not very good. And Brian Ortega is a grappler and was looking to grapple in that fight. But that doesn't say amazing things about your takedown defense when you're going against a guy like Islam. Um, I see this being Islam. I have him in a couple of different parlays already. I've also taken Islam inside the distance. If you wanted to look at the submission prop, I think that would be a good one to look at. But I think there's a world where it's a takedown and finish by ground and pound. And so the inside the distance bet to me is a little bit safer. Um, than going for the submission, even though I think that's the most likely way. And even though I think this will be a relatively easy fight for Islam, take nothing away from Volkanovski. Seriously, he is the number one pound for pound guy in the world for a reason. I just think this is a bad style matchup for him, and I think it's a tough task to come up from 145 to 155. I mean, people talk about, why is Conor McGregor a great UFC fighter, right? Part of the reason he won the belts in both of these weight classes. And, you can talk this, that about what's happened with Conor McGregor since then, but that's what originally made him great is winning the belts in the 145 and 155 weight classes. It's an incredibly tough thing to do, and the size I just think is going to be the major difference. So I've got Islam. I love Volk. I don't fault anybody for taking a like plus 300 on the number one pound for pound guy in the world. I just don't see it happening personally.
I agree with you there, and that's why I am so worried that this fight is going to be so quick, only because of how hyped up I was for the Oliveira Makhachev fight and how quick. And again, like Joe Rogan was talking about this on his podcast. It was like everyone for the longest time for the last 2 years after I think Oliveira beat Tony, he looked unbeatable. And for Makhachev to go in there and make it look so easy, it really makes you ask yourself, like, is Makhachev beatable? Like, can he be beat? Um, I think if there's a guy to do it, I don't necessarily think that it's Volkanovski going up. I think if anything, it's like Makhachev going up and him getting beat by one of the guys um, in the up, division up from him.
Right. I
Um,
mean, I think there are a couple of guys that he hasn't fought yet. I mean, I think I would give like this is a weird one,
who
but
are you gonna give?
Rafael Fiziev, I would give him a shot because he's such a good striker. That just the stylistic matchup, I think Fiziev would have a shot to beat Makhachev. Dustin Poirier's boxing is so good that I would give Dustin Poirier a shot to beat him. Those are the only two I can think of
But
off the
again,
top of
you
my
go
head.
with that. All right, you go with the striking thing, but you forget that Makhachev's got literally a superhuman like strength on the ground. DC was talking about that he hasn't met anyone that has the squeeze that Makhachev has. He said, he as a joke was saying like, all right, demonstrate a submission here. And he said he has never DC, who is by his own rights one of the best wrestlers to ever be in the UFC, for him to say Makhachev has the best squeeze that he's ever felt, that's saying something. And so I
Right.
do
Well,
think,
and especially because Makhachev is like he's a 155-pound fighter. He's a little guy compared to the
yeah,
light heavyweights and heavyweights that,
exactly.
that DC was fighting.
And you look at that, and then you go back to say, like, all right, you just get worried then as a Volkanovski fan, like, how close Ortega had that fight to being over, I think that same submission being held by Makhachev, I think he is done. I think he is lights out.
Oh,
Now,
totally.
uh there was a funny one this past weekend. Um it was one big fighter. He had no neck. He was the guy who fought Tabura last week. I can't remember
Oh,
the name.
Tabura and Ivanov,
Yeah. Yeah,
Lagoy.
yeah. They were saying about how I don't know if Tabura can get a submission here because he doesn't have a neck. I think that's the one thing Volkanovski got going for him is his neck is so he doesn't have one. So it is going to be hard to kind of find a submission on the neck. And maybe that is why he's got out of Ortega's submission was because his neck is, his traps are
Right.
so big. Um, I think the
It is
way
going to be. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, the way I'm betting this one is I'm working in Makhachev into what I find is some comfortable parlays, one of which being Crute, Rodriguez, and Makhachev. I like that safe three fighter. And if it can get to that, I already do have a nice hefty bet um on the Volkanovski the money line. I put a couple units on that just to because again I plus whatever I know I got it right now at like plus I think I got it at plus 300. I'll double check. I don't know if it was plus 290 or plus 300, but that's worth putting a sprinkle on when you're saying he's the pound for pound. But again, I thought the same thing when I was getting Oliveira at like plus 260, and he got manhandled. So, and again, in what to that point, Oliveira had done that to everyone in that division and then got beat the same way he had done it, and even easier. So
Right.
I'm hoping that this isn't a letdown fight. On this has one of those fights that you have the potential and then it ends and you're like, not that it would be comparable to this, but almost like last week where it's like, man, I thought this was going to be an epic fight, and then Lewis just got ragdolled, and it was like, why did I just stay up till 4 a.m. to watch this? Um, I hope
Yep.
that doesn't happen. This does have the potential.
This
If
one's not going to be at 4 a.m. at
no,
least.
yeah, right. This one I'm hoping gives what the crowd deserves. Um, but this is going to be an interesting fight. Again, I think we're either going to see a all out brawl or we're going to see it end really quickly with Makhachev. That's how my two. That's
Right.
what I think of the two outcomes could
Yeah,
be.
I mean, I think Volkanovski really has two paths. One is to knock him out, and I don't really see that happening. That's not really his style. I think if he loads up and overswings, he's going to get taken down easily. And I think he's smart enough to know that. So I think it's pretty unlikely that he's going to knock Islam out. And his only other really path is to keep the fight on the feet with incredible takedown defense and just have a 5 round kickboxing match with Islam. And even that he could lose. And I just see that as such an unlikely scenario to be able to happen.
I think if
Um,
this was going the other way, I think if Volkanovski was the bigger guy and he was going down instead of him coming up, I could see Volkanovski having a chance here. But with Islam being so big, I think you're right. There's no way that because again, it's just 10 pounds, but it's not really 10 pounds once they step into the cage. It's going to be probably Makhachev's probably if I'm Makhachev, I'm going to be at least 10. I'm going to be at least 165 and really weigh in on because again, Volkanovski's got to go up to 155, so again
oh yeah, he might be 175 once he gets
yeah,
in
you
the
know what I'm
cage. He might
saying?
put 20 pounds on.
And I think that's
Um,
all going to be just a lot of weight for Volkanovski to carry. So I'm hoping it's a good fight, but I could also see it ending really quickly. But I'm pulling for Volk. I think if
yeah.
he sticks to the volume, I think he can get it done. Um, so,
If
but
nothing else, I mean,
yeah,
it's going to be interesting to see what he looks like 10 pounds heavier. And I mean, we know what he looks like 50 pounds heavier because he used to play professional rugby. I think it was professional or maybe
yeah,
semi-pro or something. There are pictures of him at Volkanovski 200 pounds playing
right. Yeah, I mean
rugby.
that's was his thing. He used to be a
Um,
fat kid. He said he used to be a fat kid, and if it wasn't for fighting, he doesn't know what his life would have been, but that's what kind of helped him kind of lose his weight. I, the other thing though, but this like fight kind of brings up is like when Adesanya went up to Blachowicz and how the weight just Blachowicz just
Right. Well,
kept him on
some
the
guys
ground
can
and
do it and some guys can't. I mean, like I think, somebody like Alex Pereira going from 185 to 205, I think that's totally different than Adesanya because Alex Pereira is just monstrously huge at
yeah
185 pounds. Like for him to put on 20 pounds of muscle and still be the same size he is and fight 205ers, I don't think he'd have any problem doing that.
yeah.
We've seen a couple double champs in the day. Obviously, Connor was the first one. Henry Cejudo. I'm forgetting one or two. That's terrible of me. I should be able to remember all the
Cejudo
double
was a double
champs,
champ.
but
He beat Cruz. Yep, double champ.
right. Um, and there've been one or two others. So it can be done. It definitely can be done. It just it just seems like such a massive size difference.
Yeah.
And a bad style matchup to boot.
Yes, 100%. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, thank you again. That's our fight picks. Please check out Andrew's picks on MMA tips. That's on our Twitter. You can follow our Twitter at recliner_report, where we post daily picks. And Andrew will have our total fight card picks working throughout the week, and everything will be official before the fight card goes off on Saturday. So again, for all of our fight picks, check out our Twitter at
If you follow there, those are
recliner_report.
posted as soon as they're bet. I think I put a few in. There are some of them that have been in for like a couple of weeks already. I had an Islam in a parlay from like 3 weeks ago, but I put a bunch of bets in on like Sunday, Monday before some of the lines moved. So it's a good place to follow there. Who you got for a knockout this week?
My knockout is going to be oh, I said it earlier. Who did I say? It was it wasn't Rodriguez.
Jack Della Madalena.
Yes, that was it. Jack.
That's a good pick. I like that one. Um, I'm going to go with Tyson Pedro as my knockout pick for this week. Um, that might even be like minus money for him to win by knockout. I think, oh, it's not actually. I might look into betting this. That's plus 180 is a line you can get on Tyson Pedro by knockout. Um, I think there's a possibility he actually loses that fight even as a minus 250 or so on the money line. But I think the more likely possibility is that he gets it done in the first round again. So Tyson Pedro is my knockout pick.
I like that one. I'll be locking that one in. And my lottery pick is going to be Menifield, Randy Brown, and Volkanovski. That's my lottery pick. That's a fat daddy right there.
That's yeah, you add up all those. I mean, Randy Brown and Volk are pretty big underdogs. If you put those two together, you're gonna get yourself some nice odds. Um, my lottery pick is going to be Francisco Prado by knockout specifically, not just the money line. I mean, the money line on him is around plus 225. It's looking like at the moment. But if you go by knockout, you can get plus 575. I actually did sprinkle a tiny little bet on that knockout line. That's one that I really like. Kid's 20 years old. He's undefeated. He's finished most of his fights by knockout. And Jamie Malarkey can be chinny. So that's one that I've bet, but I think is a awesome base at plus 575 for a lottery ticket. Then, in addition to that, I was just talking about Pedro by knockout as a pick. I hate being on two sides of the same thing, but Bukowski's money line in a lottery ticket. Alonzo Menifield definitely in a lottery ticket. Probably leave it at that, and that's some pretty hefty odds, and we got to go. We're just about out of time.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Thanks again for tuning in. And as always,
Keep
keep
the
the
change.
change.